a couple of new students. So what we do in this class is go over one chapter quickly, verse by verse, in Sanskrit translation, and then we can have some discussion. If you have any question about it, then we can talk about it. So, but before we start, let's do the Gayatri Mantra. I'm sure all of you know Gayatri Mantra. So in Gayatri Mantra, we are praying to God to heighten our intellect so that we can absorb it at a better level. So, Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha Tatsavitra Varenayam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodaya. So we are on chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita. And altogether there are 18 chapters. So this is chapter number 15. And title of this chapter is Purushottama Yoga. Purushottam. Okay? So this is another name for God, Purushottam. Few chapters ago we learned that God's name is Brahm also. And title of that chapter was Akshar Brahma. That means Brahm never ends. It's eternal. It's imperishable. Over here, Purushottam Yoga. See, Purush means the Atma, the soul. Purush. And last time I was telling you the breakdown of this word Purush. See, Ish means God, Puri means the city. City means this body. The Lord of this body, that's a Purush, that's Atma. And among all the Atmas, the supreme one is called Purushottam, the Uttam Purush, the supreme Purush. So that's why it's called the supreme being. The title and the translation of this Purushottam Yoga, this author has given. Okay, so chapter 15. Let's look at the very first verse. It's a very small chapter, one of the smallest chapters, only 20 verses in it. So Lord Krishna is saying, they, that means the sages, the saints, the yogis, talk about an imperishable, ever-changing tree having its source above and countless cosmos, its branches below. The Vedic hymns are the leaves. One who truly understands this tree is a knower of the Vedas. So he is trying to describe that this whole cosmos which we see, it has been created by that God which we call Brahm. And he says the sages talk in this language. The sages talk about an imperishable, that means God never ends. Imperishable. Physical things, they perish. So imperishable, ever-changing tree. So that means the creation keeps on changing. God doesn't change, creation changes. And source above in the supreme being. So that's where everything has originated from. Cosmos, countless cosmos. And Sanskrit is called Brahmans. We see only so much in this cosmos, but there's a countless cosmos. These days, scientists, they keep on finding new and new galaxies. Still, there's no end to it. So that's why it said countless. And its branches below. The Vedic hymns are the leaves. See, the nourishment is given to the tree through the leaves also. Right? So the same way we get the knowledge from the Vedas. One who truly understands this tree is a knower of the Veda. Then he says, the branches of the tree of human life spread below and above all over the cosmos. This tree is nourished by the energy of material nature. Material nature is what? Material nature is made up of those five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. That's a material nature. That's called Prakriti. So this tree, so tree of our life, is nourished by the energy of material nature, and the sense objects are its sprouts. Sense objects, whatever we see outside, that's how our desires sprout. We see something, we hear something, and here comes a new desire. So in that sense, he says this tree is nourished by the energy of material nature, and the sense objects are its sprouts. It's a sustaining roots. And what is that? Ego and desires stretch deep in human world, causing karmic bondage. So this is a analogy of this life as a tree. We definitely get the nourishment from up there. That means the soul is a part of that super soul. But in this world, when we see the sense objects, we get attached to it. And that's how our desires and our ego sprouts. And it stretches deep in human world, causing karmic bondage. So we do certain karmas, and if we don't understand the karmic philosophy fully, then we get attached to the fruits, and that's how the bondage, we just keep on creating more and more bondage. See, good karmas also bind us. Bad karmas, of course, they bind us. So this is the bondage he's talking about. But now, if this is the tree of life, and our goal over here is to cut the bondages. Because as long as we are bondaged, we're going to keep on coming back again and again. Goal is to cut. Then that's why he says how to cut the tree of life and attain salvation by taking refuge in God. He says the beginning, the end, the basis, or the real form of this tree of life is not perceptible on earth. So perceptible means anything we can perceive with the senses. We really cannot perceive it. Having cut its deep sustaining roots by the strong axe of self-knowledge. So if we want to get out of this karmic bondage, we need to have a self-knowledge. How? Detachment. The supreme goal should be sought, reaching which one does not come back to the mortal world again. What should be always, one should always be thinking, I take refuge in that very primal person from which this primal manifestation comes forth. So again, he's saying that connection with that highest and detaching from the lower. So this primal, the original, that's where we need to have our sustenance. That's where we came from. But what happens is we just don't perceive it. We really cannot see it. We cannot touch it. We cannot hear it. We get attached to something which we can only perceive. But he says, with a strong axe of self-knowledge and detachment. So it's like on one hand, the knowledge of the self, on the other hand, detachment from the unreal. That's what we need to practice. The supreme goal is reached by the wise who are free from pride and delusion, who have conquered the evil of attachment, who constantly dwell in the Supreme Being, with all lust completely stilled, and who are free from dualities of pleasure and pain. So again, he's not just only telling us that this is what you need to do. In this verse, he's telling us how you can do it too. See, again, Bhagavad Gita is a textbook. where we constantly are given the goal and we are told how to reach that goal. And when we reach the goal, what do we attain? So he says, let's read this again. The supreme goal. See, first of all, we got to keep that mind what supreme goal is. Supreme goal of all human lives is to know yourself. So he says, supreme goal is reached by the wise who are free from pride and delusion. Pride is always about these lower levels of achievements. Pride, it's called ego also. That I have accomplished this in the material nature. It's okay to accomplish it, but becoming arrogant about it is not right. That becomes a stumbling block on this path. And delusion means you are deluded, you really don't know the goal. So that's why I said free from these two. Then he says, who have conquered the evil of attachment. So he's calling this attachment an evil. Until we firmly believe that this is an evil, we won't be able to get rid of it. A lot of people think that attachment is normal. And this attachment to the worldly life he's talking about. Okay? So he says, conquered the evil of attachment, constantly dwell in the Supreme Being. See, first we practice keeping the God in our mind, then constantly dwelling in that. With all lust completely stilled. And lust over here really means there's all kinds of passions, worldly passions. That's a lust. Who are free from dualities of pleasure and pain. See, in this material world, there's a duality. Duality at the level of physical being, duality at the level of mind, duality at the level of intellect also. So detachment from that is very important. And it happens with the practice. That's what abhyas is all about. Then he says, the sun does not illumine my supreme abode, nor does the moon, nor the fire. See, this sun which we see, the moon which we see, the earth which we see, these are all part of the creation. So he's talking about me, the creator. It is beyond this creation because I'm the one who created it. So in that sense, he says, sun does not illumine. So that means it's always bright over there. There's no talk about sun and the moon. It's light, nothing but light all the time. That is the abode he's talking about. So sun does not illumine my supreme abode, nor the moon, nor the fire. Having reached there, people attain permanent liberation. Permanent, like an eternal, all the time liberation. And do not come back to this temporal world. So he says that is a goal for us. That is the supreme goal. The eternal individual soul in the body of living beings is indeed my integral part. It associates with the six sense organs, including the mind, and activates them. So if somebody says that where does it's written that soul is part of God, exactly over here it's written. The eternal individual soul. See, our soul, when we say my, me, soul, is part of God. So the eternal, see in Sanskrit, if you know, mam ev ansho jeev loke jeev bhuta sanatana. So the eternal individual soul in the body of living beings is indeed my integral part. It's my part. It was not created by me, it is me. So that means all the qualities of God are the qualities of a soul also. So it's like a A bucket of water from the ocean has the same chemistry as the ocean. So the eternal individual soul in the body of living beings is indeed my integral part. It associates with the six sense organs. Six sense organs means five sense organs and a mind. And you all know the sense organs, our eyes, our ears, the nose, the touch, and the taste. Those are the senses. And then the mind, he says. So altogether six. So who activates them? Soul does. Soul only activates them, that's all. All the functions are done with these physical organs. Just as the air takes aroma away from the flower, similarly the individual soul takes causal and subtle bodies from the physical body it casts off during death to the new physical body it acquires in reincarnation. So a clear philosophy of reincarnation. We are in a physical body right now. We all know any being in a physical body will have to discard the physical body at a proper time. And when the time comes to discard the body, what goes with the soul? He says the causal body and the subtle body. They go with the soul. Okay? And subtle body has a mind in it, the intellect in it, the ego in it, and the chit in it. And the causal body has all the vasanas or the ignorance, all the forgetfulness of the reality that goes with us. Next time around, in different body. So this time when we came into this body, we brought whatever we had in the previous bodies. This is the Gita's philosophy. There was a life before this life and there will be life after this life. Okay, it's like a constantly. But where does it end? It ends when we have realized our supreme goal and we have worked towards that supreme goal. Then there's no life and death. Then we have merged, and that's called liberation. That's called mukti. That's called moksha. That is the supreme abode he's talking about earlier, where there's no sun, no moon, no darkness. It's just like eternal light always. Okay, and there's no coming back and leaving again and again. The living entity enjoys the sense objects. We are all living entities. We do enjoy that. The living entity enjoys the sense objects using the six sensory faculties of hearing, touch, sight, taste, smell, and mind. The ignorant cannot perceive the living entity departing from the body or staying in the body and enjoying sense pleasures by associating with the material body. But those who have the eye of knowledge can see it. So eye of knowledge means that clear distinction between the soul and the material body. So enjoy all this, but remember what is really transpiring over here. Then you are called knowledgeable. You are called wise. The yogis, striving for perfection, behold the living entity abiding in their inner psyche as consciousness. But the ignorant whose inner psyche is not pure, even though striving, cannot perceive them. So choice is ours. Do we want to stay ignorant about our identity? So the ignorant also living, but ignorant is living deluded. And the wise person is always aware of himself. And then again, just in connection with this, what we need to do, make sure that we are aware of the verse 5, where he says, free from pride and delusion. This is what we need to work on. Then we'll be aware of ourselves. When we conquer the evil of attachment, and then lust completely stilled. See, in order to reach to that ultimate, we need to do some homework also. So that's why Lord Krishna keeps on repeating those practices for us. So that is our part. So if we do the number 5, then definitely, he says, you will behold the living entity abiding in your own inner psyche. It is there. Even in the ignorant person, the consciousness is there, but ignorant person is aloof about it, is not aware about it. Then in number 12, he says, know the light energy to be mine, that comes from the sun and illumines the whole world, and is in the moon and in the fire. So wherever you see the light, he says, that's my light. I'm the one who has given that light to them. Entering the earth, I support all beings with my energy. Becoming the sap-giving moon, I nourish all the plants. So like a plant is growing, giving flowers, giving buds, giving fruits, giving seeds again. Who is doing it? That's also God's energy. Some medicinal plants, they become activated under the light of moon. So that's why he says, becoming the sap-giving moon. Some things flourish only in the sun. He says, I give that energy through the sun also. The energy giving is God, no matter from where. Then he says, becoming the digestive fire. That's also God's energy. I remain in the body of all living beings, uniting with vital breaths or bio impulses. I digest all types of food. All types of food means some food we chew. There is food we lick. There's a food we suck. There's a food we drink. So no matter which way we take the food, where is this energy coming to digest it, to give us this, sustain this life for us? He says, I do. So all kinds of food, that's what it means. No matter which way you assimilate the food. And I am seated in the inner psyche of all beings. Not just the human beings, all beings. So that's why in our little kids class today, a couple of kids beautifully recited that verse, very popular verse, where we pray to God for everybody's well-being. Sarve bhavantu sukhina. So over here he says, I am seated in the inner psyche of all beings. So it's good to pray for everybody. Memory, self-knowledge, and removal of doubts and wrong notions about God come from me. Because some people may not believe in God. That doesn't mean there's no God in them. In order to say I don't believe in God, that power to say that I don't believe in God is also God. I am in truth that which is to be known by the study of all the Vedas. When we study the scriptures, the goal is to know me, he says. I am indeed the author as well as the student of the Vedas. So there's a God in a teacher and a God in a student also. God outside, God inside. There are two entities in the cosmos. The changeable or temporal divine beings and the unchangeable eternal being spirit. All created beings are subject to change, but the spirit does not change. So in our own body, we can see that there are two things, this body and the Atma. The body keeps on changing. So he's calling that also divine. So Dvam imo Purusho Loke Kshar Akshar Evcha. So that's why this body is considered the temple too. It is good to have a body because through the body we can do the practice. But always remember the body will change. Body is not eternal, but there is something which is eternal inside this body which is called Purush. Okay, so that's why he said there are two entities. It could be the outer cosmos or it could be inner cosmos, our own little world over here. The Supreme Being is beyond both the temporal divine being and the eternal being. He is defining this Purushottam for us. He says Purushottam is beyond even this Purush. So this is a soul. Then there's a super soul which is called Purushottam. So the Supreme Being is beyond both the temporal divine beings and the eternal being. He is also called the eternal Lord Ishwar. That is another name yogis have given, Ishwar, to God, who pervades the three worlds and supports them. See, just like this body is supported and pervaded by this Ish, the soul. The same way this entire cosmos, countless galaxies, they are pervaded and supported by God. And that's called Purushottam. So this is a Purush, that's a Purushottam. So which holds it. See, this body is held by the power of the Atma. But then this earth is held by some power too. Then earth is just a small speck of the entire galaxy. Who's holding that? And who is holding the countless galaxies? That is a Purushottam. Sometimes it's very hard to even have a concept of this. But when we just go a little closer to our own self, then we can understand it a little bit better. Okay? So he says, the Supreme Being is beyond both the temporal divine being and the eternal being. He is also called the eternal Lord Ishwar, who pervades the three worlds and supports them. Because I, the Supreme Being, am beyond both the temporal beings and the eternal being, therefore I am known in this world and the scriptures as the Supreme Being. And another names for the Supreme Being we use in English, absolute reality, truth, super soul. So these are just the words used by human beings. Just like in English we have these many words for God. In Sanskrit we have many words too. But they all point to the same one. It's not that there are many gods. One power, one creator, one highest absolute truth. The wise who truly understand me as the Supreme Being know everything and worship me wholeheartedly, O Arjuna. So the outcome of this knowledge is what? It should create love for God. Not fear of God, but love for God. And worship means love. The creator who created all, part of that creator is inside and everybody else around. Develop a love for that God. Okay, so worship really means loving God. And then this worship, we do it for our sake, not for His sake. Sometimes we think that we are doing a favor to God when we worship God. Even the ritualistic worship, we think we do it. No. Ritualistic worship also really means that we are taking some time out to develop a little relationship with God, to know God. When we know somebody, we develop a liking for that person too. Knowing somebody. That's why we study also, so that we know something about God. Knowledge. Okay? So that's why he said earlier, cut asunder the ignorance with the help of the axe of knowledge. We call it a sword. Knowledge is a sword which will cut the ignorance. Okay? Last verse he says in this chapter, thus I have explained this most secret, transcendental science of the Absolute. Having understood this, one becomes enlightened. Once all duties are accomplished and the goal of human life is achieved. So clearly in this chapter, he's telling us what the goal of human life is. We often wonder what the goal is. We really don't know the purpose of this life. Somebody says, I don't know the purpose. Just tell them. Hey, look at this. Very clearly it's written. There's no confusion about it. Very directly it's written. What the goal is, how to attain the goal. What the Atma is, what the Ishwar is. What the relationship between us and the God is. These are 20 verses, simple 20 verses, not very complicated verses actually. It's a very direct, simple message for us in this chapter. It's almost like a small pill of knowledge. So this 15th chapter is often recited in the ashrams while serving food. A lot of people, they have memorized all these 20 so that you don't forget God. Even while eating, you don't forget God. At the time of distributing, you don't forget God. Because we eat several times a day. Every time, if we can just recite these 20 verses and remember what God is, what ultimate goal of mine is, then you are polishing up your psyche again and again, because otherwise we get lost in the short-term goals. Our short-term goals, they look so big to us. We lose sight. Of course, we got to work towards the short-term goals, but not at the cost of ultimate purpose. So he gives us the ultimate purpose. What do we need to do? Don't get lost into the, see, if he started out this chapter uh, with the analogy of the tree. So don't get lost into the objects, those buds in the tree. Remember where the nourishment is coming from up above. Don't lose sight from the up above. Don't just get lost into the branches. We are here to cut asunder the branches with the help of detachment and knowledge. This is what we need to work on. Detachment from the physical world and attachment to that highest. So any question, comment? It's a very small chapter. Yes, Jonathan.
So very interesting chapter. I was wondering, they mentioned that it was verse 16 where it said that the supreme being consists of both the changeable temporal divine being as well as the unchangeable eternal being.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I've considered my journey and like going through the Gita, I've only been considering joining up with the eternal being, the unchanging eternal spirit. But
Mm-hmm.
now this makes it seem that the supreme being is more than that, like something that consists of both changeable as well as unchangeable elements. And so,
Yes.
uh, so am I focusing on the wrong goal? Is there something more that I'm not aware of?
First, you focus on the unchanging in you. Okay, so like in you, doing the duties for the changing and focusing on the unchanging. Because the body is changing, mind is changing, intellect changes, ego changes, all that changes. But still, in this part of the journey, you have that, you need to take care of that. Okay, so taking care of the changing while keeping a focus on the unchanging. When you have a glimpse of this unchanging, the real glimpse, you recognize this, then you will see that everybody else has that unchanging too in them. Then there's a feeling of oneness with everybody. Then we expand it further. Then our actions also become selfless. We are still living in the changing according to our prarabdha, past karmas, but we are more and more aware of this unchanging in us and unchanging in others also. So what you are doing, what you are practicing is not wrong. It's okay. That's where the journey starts. Journey starts with what we are. Then from there, it keeps on expanding. Okay? So it definitely starts from here. Okay, we have, that's why Lord Krishna very clearly, he says, there are two. We cannot ignore the changing. And definitely we should not ignore the changeless. So that's what we are. Okay, so you are doing it right. It's just a practice. Practice, practice, more practice. When we can see, not even in the beings, another human beings or the plants or the animals or in between also, there is a changeless energy there too.
Yes, I understand the changeless part, but when we become incorporated into the supreme being, and can you explain the changing part of the supreme being? Like,
Okay, changing part of the supreme being really means this manifested. Who really created the manifested? That also God created. So God is in the changing also, God is in the unchanging also. Then you start respecting the manifested world too. You don't get attached to it, but God is the one who created. This body is not a bad thing. God created this body also. So honoring and respecting this changing part of this life also. But at the same time, not getting attached to it.
So sorry to keep asking so many questions, but
Huh?
sorry to keep asking so many questions.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you are thinking it deeply, what to do and how to practice. Because in order to practice deeply, you need to have these questions answered. Yes. What else?
So when you finally achieve the union with the supreme being, do you still have a sense of agency or like activity, but now it's just that thought and mind, let's say, is part of the universal mind? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yes, it will be a universal mind. It's just like a happening through you, but there's no sense of doership in you.
Okay. I think I
And no
understand.
sense of, it's not that you are not doing it, you are doing it, but you don't feel that you are doing it. You are enjoying it, but still you are not feeling that you are the enjoyership. Okay, so you do become it's like a higher mind. You are connected with the high. Okay, so it just happens spontaneously. But first we have to the practice. Practice starts from the micro. Okay, we cannot just practice for the macro. Practice starts with the micro, and then you grow into the macro. Okay, yeah.